Welcome to Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum. Long-form, honest conversations with founders and entrepreneurs from around the world.
This episode is brought to you by Founder Catalyst. If you're raising funds and you need to get yourself SCIS and EIS advanced assurance and you need some help with that, then stick around to find out how you can get 5% off of Founder Catalyst's services.
Hector Hughes, for my second appearance on Founders Unplugged, which I'm absolutely honoured to be making. And I am co-founder of Unplugged. We do digital detoxes of off-grid cabins in nature. Got 35 cabins across the UK and one in Spain, with many more on the way.
And it's really awesome to have you on again. You're in like the current very small Hall of Fame of like you and I think one other that's been back twice. I can't remember now. No, two. So there's three of you now.
Amazing. Well, I'm absolutely honoured. So thank you for putting it on me again.
No, man, look, the honour's all mine, honestly, because of it always is. But yeah, like I know how busy you are and how hard you've been working on Unplugged and on your version of Unplugged, the better version. And I want to hear all about it. And I've purposely not asked you before we click record about anything you've been up to, because I want to hear all about it fresh while we're recording. So fill me in. What's been going on? Like you just mentioned there in the intro, like you've got a place in Spain now, you've got more places in the UK. So what's happened over the last couple of years that I've missed? Well, I've been following along online, but
yeah, sure. Just before we get into all of that, people always say that to me. I don't know why. I think maybe people just say it to everyone, but people always say like, "Oh, you must be so busy." It always makes me smile. I don't know why. Like, because in my head, I'm like, "Am I that busy? Should I be busier?" But sometimes I am busy.
Is it making you think, "Oh shit, I'm meant to be a bit busy"?
Doing something more? But no, sometimes I am pretty busy. But I really don't love being busy. I'll try not be busy. This weekend, I'm very not busy. I have one plan on Sunday, and the rest of the weekend is free. So as of right now, I'm not that busy. Which is,
do you find yourself like filling the time then with other stuff, or do you just enjoy that time?
I'm quite good at just existing. So I'll kind of read.
Right.
I'm not like, if I have a day spare, how do I see loads of people and do it? Love my friends and blah blah blah. But I'm very content in my own company, and it depends what's going on in life. Like I'm about 6 weeks out of a relationship. So obviously when you're in a relationship, things are different. So there's very life dependent.
But I mean, that's very much on brand.
Yeah, right? Well, exactly. I mean, I've got a reputation to uphold. I frankly can't be. It would be ludicrous if I was busy the whole time. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that. Yeah, just kind of making the most of this period. Definitely still a lot going on. And yeah, the last 2 years have been a journey. Been through a real kind of personal journey, I think, especially the last like 6 months or so, I would say. And business has been a lot of fun. I think it's amazing how long these things take. Like we've been coming up to 5 years now. I think what's really exciting is all of the initial hypotheses around, what we could create in this space are holding. And I think we are really seeing a huge momentum on the brand side of things. So there's just a real, like the goal for us has always been, like, can we make this culturally significant? So can we make being unplugged to switching off what Ubering is for getting around? And it really feels like we're on the right track there. I think a lot of startups are like a moment in time where, you've really got to capitalize on this for the next 2 years and then sell it as quickly as you can and move on to the next thing. But I think what's really nice about this, it feels like we're on the right side of history, and like there's just momentum building. And the more everything goes online, which it is hugely, obviously, the rarer time offline is, and therefore the more valuable. So it's amazing to actually be able to give that to people. So yeah, we've really seen, I think we've tightened up a lot of stuff as we've grown around, the experience and just really making sure that people have the best possible time. And so that has, I think it feels in a really good place there. And then on the business side, the big bottleneck's always been supply. So, cabins are complicated to get out there and deploy in the wild. So a couple of years ago, we only grew from 16 to 20 cabins. We were still posting it on LinkedIn. So everyone was like, "Oh man, you guys are growing so fast." I was like, "No, we're not." But thanks. And then last year we went from 20 to 32, and then this year we'll go from 32 to 62. So really starting to ramp up on that side of things, which is super exciting. Yeah. And obviously alongside that, scaling all the other parts of the business as well. So yeah, it feels like there's a lot to get our teeth into this year. Start of the year, it was like, okay, loads of stuff to figure out. And we just had, we're recording this just at the start of April, had a super productive Q1, just like getting everything ready to go. So yeah, it's always better when the sun's shining in an off-grid cabin company. And so there's just, I say morale is super high at the moment, and everyone's just excited for the year ahead.
That's a good point, actually. From a seasonality perspective, does it dip quite significantly, or do you still find people are still, because you're not really pushing it as like a summer experience type? It's not really based on that. It's more about the idea of unplugging and sort of recharging and all that. Does it have as much of an effect?
Yeah, there's a bit of seasonality. I mean, our occupancy is like 87% for the last couple of years, all year round. So super high. Wow. Probably January and December, the two slower months, and December everyone in London's just in a pub drinking basically, and then January recovering. So we see a bit of a dip then, but then winter you are just going for something different. You know, it's about the wood stove and being inside with a book and cooking and all of these kind of things. And we actually get a lot of people who will mix it up. So come in the summer and then maybe come a year later in the winter to try a different experience, because it is really different. Really, all 4 seasons, you can have a very different experience. So yeah. But I think for us, it's just about how can we almost have diversity in what we're offering while still staying super focused on. It's a 3-day digital detox in nature. But then outside of that, I think there's so much we can do around like locations and who we're partnering up with and the seasons and all of these kind of things that offer variety to people, because fundamentally the goal is really like, how can we help people make this a habit? Like how can we get people coming to us every 6 to 12 months? Because it's super important. I mean, I do it probably every 6 months. It's still an incredible reset. Not maybe a little biased, but it really is.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a seasonality, psychological aspect to seasonality, which is, I suppose, maybe a bit of a barrier as well, which is people are inherently feel a lot more isolated and lonely in the colder months as well. So maybe the idea of isolating yourself isn't as appealing because of that. But having said that, like being comfy and cozy is appealing. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's so cool. What's the stuff that maybe you were saying you kind of refined a little bit more around, or defined a bit more about the messaging and stuff like that, and especially as it's kind of becoming more and more of a topic, I guess. Especially, I'm sure we'll get into it, but like, you know, especially in recent media and stuff like that about being online, the risks of being online, and I think you kind of touched on how it's a lot more in our minds now that we're a little bit too reliant on these devices and on being connected. But yeah, just what is it that you've been doing differently there, if anything, in terms of the messaging and making it kind of a bit tighter?
I think the most important thing is just consistency of messaging, and there's a lot to be said for just banging on about the same thing for a very long time. And I've been banging this drum for 5 years now. Definitely going to do it for another 5, probably much longer. And that I think that does something. You know, if people just hear you bang that same drum again and again, then there's something about where we are in our lives, and we're not always ready for certain messages at certain times. I think this is a message in particular that a lot of people have just woken up to in the last couple of years. So we're just seeing a lot of people kind of really come to this. And then what's amazing is, because we've been around for a few years now, because we've had lots of people go and do this and have a lot of benefit off the back of it, then we're just in that conversation. So whenever something comes up around being off your phone or whatever it is, like we'll get reference, which is obviously great from a business point of view. Yeah, you pop up quite organically, but also from the change you want to make in the world point of view. I think that the focus has always been like, how can we normalize going and spending 3 days offline in a cabin? Because I think it's almost inconceivable to a lot of people. And I think just by existing and by getting people to do this, then we can help normalize that. And fundamentally, the belief is that it's a better society if more people are doing it.
Why do you think it is becoming more of a sort of topic of conversation now?
I think because of the change, right? Like because things are transitioning so much, then that has consequences. And like fundamentally, it's not. I'm not going to sit here and say technology is terrible, this kind of stuff. Like, we're obviously a tech-enabled company, massively appreciate the benefits of that, but it does have a cost. Like humans who are spending 12 hours a day on screens are more anxious. They have worse concentration, like all of these kind of things. So I think there's a mental health epidemic going on. I think there's a physical health epidemic as well. I actually myself had some pretty wild autoimmune issues the last 4 years. Basically found out that was due to mold poisoning, which is a whole other story. But then a lot of these autoimmune issues are worsened by suppressed emotion and all these kind of things. So I just think there's a whole, fundamentally, it's so siloed what's happening in physical health, mental health, all these kind of things, when actually it's all linked. So to answer your question, I just think I just think it's a lot these days. Like we are overwhelmed. Wake up in the morning, check your phone. You basically spend the whole day in this state of distraction. If you live in a city like London, you're just overstimulated all day long. And I think if you put that with just all of the rate of change that's happening in this day and age, then it's a lot. It's a lot for people.
Yeah. I appreciate what you said there as well about like how these things are interconnected. It worries me that like there's not enough nuance in some of these conversations, especially when it comes to like things like health and mental health, that it's very much framed in like, its own world, and people don't see the interconnectivity of that with things like exercise, diet, the friends you keep, the way you conduct yourself, like it's all interconnected. It's good to look at like solutions for these things, but not to just assume that they're going to fix everything. Which I think, again, because of the way that the online world is constructed, it to get your attention quickly and to give you that piece of information and then satisfaction. I think again that's some sort of training that's happening within a lot of people's minds, that problems are also much simpler to solve. But in some way, do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, oh, it's just a button and you just click it and then the thing's done. There's that lack of appreciation for complexity.
Yeah, 100%. I think you're exactly right, and I think that's it. Is people I tried all these things and in isolation, none of them worked. When, as you say, it's a completely a multivariate problem. There are many, many, many things going on, and I think probably where I stand in all of this is, I think Yuval Noah Harari really nailed it in *Sapiens*, which is a classic book, fairly done these days. But his whole hypothesis in that was we haven't changed biologically from 50,000 years ago, and yet we're living in this environment that we're so poorly suited to. We're built to live in tribes of 150 people, yet we're living now connected to millions or billions online. Cities obviously completely different to the natural environment that we're brought up in. So I think it is just that sense of, there's something called, I think it's called zucosis, which is when you take an animal out of its natural environment and you put it in a zoo, then it will just kind of wither and really kind of become a worse version of itself. And what's interesting is humans are the only animal that are, like science says, are not affected by zucosis. And yet look at us now. Like we are a shadow of what we can be, I think. And I think it's just normalized. Like it's normal now that we walk around with this constant low-level anxiety, for example. That is not healthy. Yeah.
Well, I mean, anxiety is healthy in small doses.
Exactly. But not chronic.
I mean, if we're going to buy it, right? Exactly. Yeah, because and I think this is again where nuance is lost when people have these conversations. Is they're like, oh, anxiety, depression, bad. Like eradicate it. It's like, no, it's there for a reason. It's a mechanism. It's an evolutionary mechanism that's there for a very, very important purpose. But yeah, you shouldn't be feeling it continuously like that. That there's something very wrong there. But yeah, what did you say it was called? What? Zucosis. Yeah, that's interesting because I know animals. I mean, their life expectancy
100%.
is awful and all sorts. And when you think about it in the context of human beings, that's a really good analogy because
to take movement, like we are built to move, and most of us spend 12 hours a day sitting down.
Hi, a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like and subscribe. And if you are feeling really supportive, please consider reviewing the show on the podcast platform of your choice. It all really helps support what we do. Thank you. Now back to the show.
Which is absolutely wild.
Yeah, it's all the same rules you would apply to like a wild animal, right? That this species is used to traveling vast distances, hunting for its food, etc., etc., etc. Don't put it in captivity. So where you could very much make the same conclusions with a human being. Yeah, sitting at a desk all day, every day. I got myself a treadmill.
Did you?
Which look, it's not quite. I mean, I still walk my dog, but I just which is better, obviously, being outside and going on the seafront and stuff. But I just realised I put on quite a bit of weight a little while ago. I managed to lose it recently.
Good, man. I was going to say.
Thank you, appreciate it. But I just I just thought, look, for that sort of 10, 15, 20 minutes, half an hour first thing in the morning when I've got stuff to do. Why not? I've got a standing desk. I should probably use it.
Yeah.
Like just whip the thing underneath and away we go. But there are ways of doing it. But it's about making the effort, right?
And prioritizing. I think, there is a lot of noise around that now, which is good. I think things like the 10,000 steps a day. I'm not sure where that came from, but that I think has done a lot of good in society because it just again normalizes healthy behavior.
Yeah. But what you said right at the beginning, actually, I think is kind of key. About being busy. I think I certainly get anxious if I'm not busy. This is something that I've been criticized very heavily by
I get
my
anxious
wife.
if I am busy. I'm sure I get anxious if I'm not as well, but yeah, go on, sorry.
Right. No, it's fine. No, I can get anxious if I'm too busy too, of course, but if I've got nothing going on, I can't just sit down and do nothing. Basically, I'm the worst. So like on holiday with the wife, she can't stand the fact that she'll want to lay down and do nothing, read a book, and I'm like, I have to get up, I have to do something, I have to go. And I think you've got a really important sort of mindset to that, which is just because a day or a time slot is empty doesn't mean you have to fill it with something. And I think especially as a founder, so founder to founder, like I am very guilty of thinking I need to just fill it. Because I'm a founder, that's what I'm meant to do. I should be moving. I should be doing something instead of just recharging and maybe unplugging. Leave the phone alone.
Yeah, I do have lots of thoughts on that. But before that, I would love to know, like, what do you think it is? Like, what's driving that in you? And again, I think it's such a common thing. But like in that moment when you're sitting there on the sun lounger, like, what's the voice?
Oh, wait, on holiday and stuff.
Like, where do you think it comes from?
I think it was driven into me very early by my dad about work ethic and work hard and then and all that. And so I think a part of it is about usefulness, right? Wanting to feel useful, wanting to feel like I'm providing, that I'm carrying my weight, that kind of thing. And so so sort of tuned into that all the time of like, go and fix this, go and make that, go and buy this, go and whatever, as I always have been, very self-sufficient and things like that I think moments where I don't have to, then I will just look at the long list of, husband, father sort of duties that I've got that's ever growing and just think, well, I should just go and do some of those. That's my job. It feels like a sense of duty. Do you know what I mean?
100%.
I don't know if that makes sense.
I think one shift I've had with this in like recent years, I think, is started to really see the benefit in not doing anything. Because I think you're right. I think there's like a feeling of it's like lost time. I definitely went through a phase. So when I was 25, I'd just come off the back of a decade of just, I was a complete reprobate, drinking, drugs, all these kind of things, and really had a big 180 rebrand. And the next period, I think I just went very extreme in the other direction of like, I always need to be super productive. And for me, that was like meditating and reading and running unplugged. But I think what was interesting is within that, I took rest very seriously. So I took like reading a book or meditating as like, this is my salvation to some extent, because like this will help me. I think I was a massive believer, and still am, in the positive changes that could have in my life. I guess it's a different kind of, it's the same thing, isn't it? It's this like need to, it's just like striving almost, this like need to busy ourselves. And I think what I've realized on the work side of things, because I do definitely get myself too busy. I hate when I am too busy. It for me, it always comes from a place of insecurity. It's always when I'm behind on something I need to do, so I haven't raised money I need to raise, or I'm procrastinating on. And because I like haven't faced that big thing yet, sometimes we have these things that build in that we know we need to do, and we just haven't quite faced them yet. The insecurity from that makes me just go and get busy with something else so I can make myself feel better. And what I find is the work I do in those times is just shit, basically. I'm sorry, I hope it wasn't too early in the conversation for swearing, but
no, we're all right. I think we're past the 10-minute mark, so we're good.
It was.
I swore after like 2 minutes, so I completely didn't listen to my own advice.
Yes, so I just realized that the work I do, and I find the busier I am, almost the poorer the work I do, if I'm really stepping back. I think it's because it's like you just get busy with stuff, just like sending emails and whatever it is. And I'm a big believer that most stuff that happens in most companies is such a fucking waste of time. And, usually if I look back on like my last month, it's like a couple of conversations, a couple of big decisions that really moved the needle, and everything else was just like stuff and admin. And obviously that has to happen, that, things need to move forward, but a lot of it doesn't need to happen. And I think there's so much emailing for the sake of emailing and messaging for the sake of messaging. And so I, from that realization, I think I can much more make peace with the like doing nothing for a period, because it's like, this isn't anywhere like as much of a waste of time as if I was sitting trying to work right now. There's a good Paul Graham essay about, it's something about like losing money. And it's basically that the people he's seen who have made loads of money, it's actually about time, but he talks about it, about money. And he's like, the people who have lost it all are the ones who think they're being productive with it. So the ones who invest in stuff because they think it's productive, and they just squander all of their money through that and investments that don't work out. And he's like, the people that really go and splash out and indulge themselves, because it's so obviously frivolous, if you go and buy a Lamborghini or a beach house or whatever it is, like those people usually aren't the ones that get into trouble. And I think it's the same with time, which is if you go and do something that's a complete waste of time, then after a while you're like, God, I'm wasting time here. Like your brain is like, okay, at some point we need to do some work. Whereas I think you can waste a life, and you can waste a year, you can waste a month, just doing work to make yourself feel better that actually is just completely irrelevant. And so I reckon that is a very widespread problem, and I definitely suffer from it as well.
Yeah. Well, I think we all do to an extent, one way or the other, right? We're never going to master it. And I think that's where some of this kind of continuous anxiety comes from. It's like, am I doing too much? Am I not doing enough? I mean, like, so right now I'm raising pre-seed for my startup, and like, it's, over the last couple of months since we announced that, and I'm sure until we close it, that's a constant thing on the back of my mind. It's like, am I doing enough? Am I reaching out to enough, angel investors? Am I having enough booking enough meetings, having enough conversations? Should I be doing more? And the answer from any expert, or any founder would probably be, well, yes, of course you should be doing more. Like you should be going, 100 miles an hour. You should be speaking to as many people as possible. Otherwise you're not going to increase your chances. But at some point you do have to say, okay, but I just need half an hour for myself. Like I need to refocus. And, I am getting better at it, and, not filling the time with like, to even to some extent, like reading a book or, I don't know, writing, or, there are things you can do that would be considered calming, that we would count as doing nothing maybe. But actually I quite like to prioritize sitting on a bench and just staring at the surrounding, like literally doing nothing, because I think you can actually hear yourself for the first time when you do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is quite a rare occurrence. You know
100%.
what I mean?
I think there's a huge part of the insight plays with startups. And so, I mean, take fundraising, because it's obviously a very complex game process. And there's a huge numbers game component to it. There's a huge momentum component to it for sure. But I feel like there's also a sense of, definitely had periods in the past where I felt like I was banging my head against a brick wall, and then have taken a step back and realized that like there was one person or a couple of people that I'd completely forgotten about who'd actually be perfect for this. Or I was completely represented the business in the wrong way, and there was something I should be doing differently. And those moments can really make months of work irrelevant. And so I think, again, there's a big sense of, making sure, especially something like this, like there is a real, you just need to get it done. But there's also a sense of like not just doing work for the sake of work. It's like really taking a step back and figuring out like, is there a better way?
Well, it's like you said, the quality just diminishes anyway, and I noticed that especially early on, where the messaging was getting lost, and it was all getting diluted and muddy, and it was only actually until I went for a drink with a friend of mine, another founder, and we started chatting, and then there was a sort of moment of clarity there. I was like, shit, I've been doing this wrong. Like, I've been approaching it the wrong way. So you need to step away from it, for sure, and get that perspective. Sometimes not even, I don't think we were even talking about it. Like we were just talking about something else, but for some reason it helped. Have you guys raised since we last caught up?
It's been very bits and bobs. So we just closed about $1 million in debt for this year. Did a little bit more equity at some point, but we could basically do debt from here. It's just we'll be break even this summer, and then it just becomes you just then got to fund the capex of the cabins, and that just becomes a debt play. So I think I need to go and figure out how to get the bigger debt facilities. I think so. Working with a fractional CFO, which has been a huge unlock. I was always, I'm a real one for winging it, which I think gets you to a certain stage, but there's definitely that caps out at some stage, and especially when you're talking about getting very serious amounts of money in. I'm very much like scribble the stuff on the back of an envelope, wing it, fast and loose, and so actually getting some adult supervision on that side of things has been absolutely transformational. It's one of those things where I'm like, why didn't I do this 3 years ago? But I'm glad we've done it now.
It's the right time when it's the right time. So why has that been so transformational?
Well, just because it's a really important part of the business, and I'm a little embarrassed that it's taken me this long to get some help on it. Like we, just in terms of like, there's a lot of things that it was very much like, yeah, this kind of works and it's about right. And we don't need to look too much into the details. And so I think he's just done an amazing job of coming in and just really tightening things up and just teaching me like how to think about the business. So what I found fascinating about this whole journey is you change how you think about your business the whole time. And like the game you're playing, and I think the game the founder thinks they're playing is a big, asset or liability to the whole business. Because fundamentally, I think every business is heading in the direction that, towards the founder's insight of the game and the kind of world you're building. So you can have two companies that on the surface are very similar.
Raising investment is painful enough without getting bogged down in legal costs. That's why I'm using Founder Catalyst, today's sponsor for Peer, my startup's pre-seed raise. We've been lucky enough to have Sam, the CEO of Founder Catalyst, on the show before. Go and check out that episode. Their funding round service offers the most cost-effective way to produce funding round legals in the UK. It's just £1,495 excluding VAT, with no monthly fees or hidden extras, no matter how much you're raising. One Founder Catalyst customer recently raised 2.7 million and saved around £10,000 compared to the next option. If you're looking for SEIS, EIS Advanced Assurance, they've got a 100% success rate over the last 3 years. Founder Catalyst is built by founders for founders, and from my own experience, I can't recommend them enough. You can scan the QR code on the screen around here somewhere or around there somewhere, I don't know, or use the link in the description for 5% off. Thank you to Founder Catalyst for sponsoring this episode. Now back to it.
But the founders could see the space, see the problem, see everything in a different way. And then you'll end up with vastly different results. So I think a hugely underappreciated asset is how you as the founder see the world, see the industry. So yeah, I definitely think there's a huge amount of like leveling up on that. And it's a stage, it's definitely a case of like at each stage as a founder, you're kind of back to zero, and you have to, not back to zero, you bring a lot along the way, but you have to completely reinvent yourself at every different stage. I had something good the other day that every 2 years you should rip up your business and start again, which I love the kind of sentiment behind it, of you just get so bogged down by all these assumptions of how things should be and just kind of trapped in your ways. So I had a real period of that at the start of this year where it was like we've been through these periods of, just really doing a lot on a shoestring and, not growing particularly fast on the supply side, but I think doing really well on the brand side of things. And now the supply side is really starting to scale. And it's like, how do we level up the rest of the business to keep up with that? So it really felt like we kind of stepped into a new period as a business. And there were moments where it's like, fuck, what are we doing here? What am I doing here? And really had to dig deep. And then, as you say, you have conversations with other people, you start to unpick it. And it's amazing how like all the answers you need are out there. It's just like figuring out who the right person is to talk to, who's been there and done it. And yeah, I found it incredibly valuable and humbling along the way, just kind of speaking to other founders about how they see things. Like, everyone's got their own views and perspectives. There could be someone that you massively agree with, but they could just, they could say one thing, they could shine one light on how you do things, and you're like, fuck, why didn't I think of that? So yeah, that's been a lot of fun as well. I think it's very refreshing to be coming out of the other side of it.
What are some of those revelations? Can you share like some things that have maybe like changed your perspective on either being a founder or the business as a whole? Is there any to stand out?
I think, one big one is like there are just areas where experts really help. So me and Ben we're just always really skeptical of like consultants and experts and all these kind of things. So we've really shied away from that. And in the last few months, including the fractional CFO in this bracket, like working with people who really have deep domain expertise has been incredibly valuable. We've done that across a few different areas in the business, and it's I feel like just getting the right people as well. I think there's a lot of fluff out there generally. There'll be a lot more fluff now that so much is AI generated, and so I think the right person. I've always been a big believer that the right hire can massively transform a business, but sometimes it's just the right expert at the right time just to give you the right advice is also huge. I think the other big transition, which I've known we needed to make for a long time, but we haven't, we've managed to get away without, is just like really getting clinical on the data side of things. So I think marketing especially is an art and a science. We've always been very good at the art and really neglecting of the science, and that's fine when you're growing at the speed we were growing at. But I think now that it's really about stepping up, then it's just really time to get data driven and just to put that holistic machine together. So specifically, we were always very strong on organic, and paid was a bit of an afterthought. Now it's actually how do we incorporate paid more to really amplify all the great things on the organic side of things, because that's still the strongest part of the brand, but it's how do we really use all of that in a system together. So yeah, there's just lots of assumptions we had around how we were going to scale this business that we've just had to challenge, to rip up, to start again from scratch, and yeah, feel in a really good place after the last few months. And the other big one is, which again, I've been meaning to for a long time, is I started therapy at the start of the year, and that's been a huge unlock as well, because fundamentally, I think every founder is the biggest bottleneck in their startup. Everything comes to some extent through you, and working on your own limitations is incredibly valuable. So yeah, I've done a lot of work on that this year, which has been very confronting, very uncomfortable, but has had a huge impact on both my personal and professional life.
Do you work with a startup founder specific therapist? Because of I know that's a thing. I've had one on the show actually. We did a special episode together where we went back through previous episodes and psychoanalyzed guests.
What were they called? I'll listen to that.
Yariv Gaynor.
Yeah, I'd love to listen to that. I do, but that wasn't by choice. Actually, I had a couple of different tasting sessions at the end of last year, and one was with a young woman who's very bright, very snappy, had a really good conversation, came out of feeling very energized. Like, she's great, I'll work with her. And I met this chap who I'm working with, and he's like middle-aged Scottish, a kind of dry sense of humor, and he just so deeply challenged me within the first 5-10 minutes. And he does work with a lot of founders, so he could call out a lot of work-related things as well. And I left that just feeling so triggered and kind of fight or flight mode. And I just thought, fuck, I'm gonna have to work with that guy. So I've been working with him since the start of the year, and it's been incredibly confronting.
Such a typical founder way of choosing as well. That speaks a lot to the psychology of a founder, doesn't it? Like, oh well, that one's harder, so it must be that one.
Yeah. No, there's a lot to be said for it. And it's been really tough, because I'm someone who keeps. I've been good at keeping people or problems at arm's length to some extent. Like, I'm good at kind of talking my way out of stuff and rationalizing and not facing hard truths, not being held accountable, all these kind of things. There's just no escaping with him. So I was in 2:00 on a Tuesday, and then always come out that reeling. So it kind of reverberates through my whole week. So it's been a really intense period. There's been a lot of there's all this change on the unplugged side of things. There's this therapy, there's had a breakup, had all sorts of things. So it's very invigorating, but it's been intense. So I could do with going and locking myself in a cabin at some point soon.
Yeah, well, you've got plenty to choose from now. So yeah, but I mean, you must be doing it. You're continuing to do it, so it must be helping.
100%, right? And I'm in a really good place. I think end of last year, I wasn't, to be honest. I think I felt a real weight. I could never quite put my finger on why. And I'd always be so people would ask, I'm like, yeah, I'm good. The weight of running a startup. And I think that was just my kind of narrative. And what I've realized with this work is that actually that's not it. It's the weight of all the emotional suppression. And not to get too much into it, very happy to share if you want to hear, but it's years of just locking away emotions and just always having this attitude of I'm fine, I'll be fine, whatever happens. Putting everyone else before myself, and just always having this emotional suppression. I think on one hand it's good for resilience, but on the other hand, that there's a cost, and that just builds up and builds up and builds up. I'm sure it was a huge contributor to the health issues I had. And so now the work is focusing on sitting with those emotions, even recognizing those emotions. Because there are things I'll talk about with my therapist, and he'll be like, how do you feel about that? I'm like, I don't know. I don't really feel any emotion on that. So it's a little bit strange. So there's a lot of work around that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. And I appreciate you sharing that. But it's a tough one because, I actually had a conversation with my wife about this recently, because what was it? I think it's because of the new show Adolescence, sure. and it's, as it has done with everyone, it sparked a conversation, and it sparked a conversation between my wife and I about masculinity. Specifically, for whatever reason, we managed to get onto the topic of her asking me, about my ability to express my emotions. And I said, I think I'm pretty good, and she was like, you could be better, right? Yeah. as would be the typical response, I'd imagine, from a partner. But, I was like, I think I'm pretty good. I'll let you know, how I'm feeling. I'm pretty direct and all that. She's like, you could be better. And I pushed back a little bit. I said, look, I think I express my emotions to the right amount for me, because my concern is, and I think a lot of people's concerns are, that you don't want to expose your neck too much, right? And look, I mean, I'm sure if I was to speak to a therapist, they'd tell me I'm wrong, or he or she would tell me I'm wrong. But I'm concerned, and maybe, I don't know if this was something you experienced too, but I don't want to be a burden. And I think this is a common theme with people who suppress their emotions. Especially if you're the one that is kind of there to fix things or help people, if you're the caregiver yourself, you just don't want to be seen as the one that's sort of piling on for other people. And so I pretty much said, look, I'm the provider of our family. I'm here to support. I'm not here to burden. But if something does come up, if it's important, I would express it. But otherwise, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm lying to myself, but I genuinely believe that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe I'm going to need to see someone.
No, I mean, it's working. But yeah, I think it's exactly the same thing with me. And there's definitely a sense of feeling like I would be a burden to people if I did share that I was going through with my parents, for example. Like, they have enough shit to worry about as the narrative in my head. So I don't want to put whatever this is on them. And I've always had this attitude of like, I'll be fine. I can figure it out. So yeah, but I mean, in my particular case, like, there was a cost. There is a cost. And I think one really interesting thing that's come up a lot is shame, and just how much of these things come back to shame. And, we have all of these things from our past that we bury away. And I think this attitude of like, I'm fine, and, I don't need to talk about these things, really doesn't give that the space. So I think there were lots of things in my past which I felt a lot of shame for. I really had a very eventful decade of drinking and doing all sorts of stupid shit. And there's lots of stuff in there that I would wake up and just feel so much shame and regret, and I just lock that away. And I think what happened then is that shame kind of becomes part of you, I think. So I think it's only like the work I'm doing now is to like recognize that the emotion that's coming up there is shame, and actually like changing that narrative, I think. So, it's seeing 13, 14, 15 years old and looking back and being like, look, he's just a young, vulnerable boy, and you don't need to feel shame towards him for what happened there. So I think it's, a lot of the work has been swapping in compassion for shame. But as I've been looking at, I mean, this is literally work in the last 2 weeks. Like, as I've been looking out for moments of shame, like, I've been amazed by how much it comes up. Like, how much through the day, little things that I'll like feel bad about this or this. And I'm like, there's some shame there, And so it's really, really interesting. So I see myself, especially in the last few years, as, an optimistic person, as someone who's like sure on himself in many ways, but like, there's still a lot of shit in there. Like, I would say I'm someone who doesn't have too much baggage, but there's still a lot of fucking baggage. Yeah, it's crazy. And it's one of those things, like, the more you dig into it, the more you're like, wow, there's a lot of pain in there.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you're sort of really going through a journey of like trying to find ways to forgive your prior self, to let these things go. Are you at all concerned with maybe going too far with it? Because it's like, okay, good, there are things there that need to be identified that are maybe holding you back, or affecting you in ways that you don't quite recognize or understand yet. Okay, that we can put that sort of bunch of stuff in a category and say healthy things to explore and to forgive yourself for. But then, are you at all concerned that there's a kind of another category of stuff that if you go looking for something, you will find it? Kind of. Do you know what I mean? That actually, maybe it's finding it for the sake of finding it. Are you at all worried about that?
Well, I think you say find it for the sake of finding it, but it's there, right? So I guess there's two different things.
Right.
There's two really interesting things on trauma, and like, I perhaps won't go into details today, but like, I brought some really very traumatic stuff that I'm kind of working through now, and I think I've heard two different sides of this. One is like, you can bring up stuff that will, really put you in a bad place. So you see that when people go on silent retreats or, ayahuasca or whatever it is, and it just brings up something that was so deeply buried they completely forgot about it. There's actually a great example of that is Tim Ferriss. He did a podcast a few years ago now, which was really an incredible thing to do. And it was about, he was repeatedly sexually abused as a child by his babysitter. And he'd completely repressed that to an extent that he didn't remember it had happened for decades and decades. And then it came out during a ayahuasca retreat, and he didn't think much of it. And then he did a silent retreat a few weeks later and just broke down and was like, it all came flooding back. And what was interesting is,
if you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please like, subscribe with notifications turned on, and let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. This lets YouTube know we are doing something right. Back to the show.
That was in there, and sure, it pushed him to this kind of effectively a breakdown. But for his whole life up until that point, he'd had a really bad temper, and he would just have these unexplained moments of rage when he would just explode. And he linked that to that. So basically, to your point, I think just because these things, we're not conscious of these things, doesn't mean they're not affecting our life in certain ways. So that's one thing. I think if there's anything painful in there, it's probably better out than in, even though that process might be very painful. And the other thing is, I've heard a few people say they don't want to solve all of their trauma because it's also what makes them ambitious, and they feel like they're not going to go and create great things if they solve too much of their trauma. I think good problem to have. And I also think, like, if you get to that stage, you realize that, why do you need to be great anyway? And I think that's a much healthier way of being. So,
right, I was going to say, that doesn't sound like a natural problem that exists.
Well, exactly.
Like, if you're ambitious, you're ambitious. Yeah.
No, I don't know, because I think the Elon Musk of the world, that comes from a very unhealthy place. It comes from being bullied as a child and having an abusive relationship with his father, and it's this like need to prove the world he's special, And he's gone on to do extraordinary things. There's no doubt that he's an absolute genius as well. But the extent that he has pushed himself, like the stories of how he's achieved what he's achieved with SpaceX, Tesla, like you name it, is through just this unbelievable determination. And I think that comes from a place of pain. Obviously, don't know the guy, but you read a few biographies about him.
Maybe, but that you could say that's maybe the catalyst to get going. But I mean, once you're in it, then the mission itself becomes the thing you would imagine that motivates you, like to attain the overall goal of that particular venture.
I don't know.
I wouldn't imagine that addressing the underlying. I mean, I don't know. Who knows, right? Everyone's different, but I wouldn't imagine that addressing the underlying trauma or whatever that sort of spurred you on to want to do these things in the first place would then suddenly make you go, do you know what? I think I'm going to close this company down. Like, there's no point exploring space.
100%. 100%.
The mission is still huge, and I think that's what captivates.
100%. I think you should stay on mission. I think you're exactly right. But we're talking about the like real outsized. The real anomalies here. And I think
right, yeah,
they wouldn't be as extraordinary as they are without that pain. You look through history, like all of these characters, the Alexander the Greats, the Napoleons, all of these characters who made a real mark on history had just a lot of this kind of trait, this like like Napoleon, completely reckless, and he was always going to blow himself up. And there's a lot of that in Elon Musk. And I think, yeah, you could be, and again, like I don't feel like I'm hugely driven by trauma. I think there's a bit of like every entrepreneur is like trying to show the world how special they are. But I don't think, for example, if I cured all my trauma, that I would be any less motivated to do what I'm doing, because I'm mission driven. But I also don't think that I feel really all in on Unplugged, but like I'm definitely quite a few levels below the all in that Elon Musk is, for example, And I'm glad.
Most of us
I'm glad I'm not him. I'm glad I'm here and doing what works for me. And I think we'll build something incredible.
He needs to unplug.
He does need to unplug. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. So
maybe that should be your next big marketing campaign.
Get Elon to a cabin.
To try and get Elon Musk to a cabin.
Yeah, Elon, I'm sure he's a listener. So if you're listening, Elon, then we're here.
Oh yeah, he's an avid listener. Yeah. Of course he is.
So no, I think it's really interesting, and I think, but to the point around the like pain, facing the pain of bringing this stuff up, I do feel that for whatever reason, I like therapy. I like kind of figuring out my issues, and I feel like I'm in a good place to face my deepest, darkest experiences and parts of me. And yeah, like,
you're sort of equipped for
exactly. So I'm feeling very up for it. I'm feeling in a good headspace to do it. But I think, that can happen. Like I know a lot of people who have been sent completely off track because they've had something that was too much, too quickly, too confronting. So I think we're all at different stages in life. We are all, very different in how we receive these things as well. For whatever reason, it's just quite a good fit for me personality-wise. And it's just, it's something that I kind of very actively seek. So I'm not worried about it myself, but there's obviously big disclaimers that these things can be very destabilizing as well.
Yeah, but I'm glad to hear that, man. It's and I appreciate you sharing it, because it's it's quite a vulnerable position to be. Well, I suppose both vulnerable and empowering at the same time. That's kind of the point, right? There's a duality to it. But yeah, look, I've done therapy before. I found it very rewarding at the time. I haven't done it for some time. My wife tells me I should do it again. But for similar reasons that you mentioned, actually, to be honest, and I know I probably should address those things, but I guess my concern, and why I asked you that question, is that I have that concern that also occurred when I was going through it when I was younger and doing therapy, which was, it did feel like on occasion I was being led down a sort of a way of thinking where I was inevitably always going to find something at the end of that journey, not necessarily because there was something there, but because of the frame of mind going into that journey was to find something. Do you know what I mean? So inevitably, we always did, and there were a couple of occasions along that journey. I just realized, like, oh, this is actually quite an empty journey. There are bigger things to address, but it filled the time. And it made me feel, a bit like filling the calendar. Sure. It was a similar thing where it's like, oh, okay, it feels like we've done the work, and it was only in retrospect that now thinking about it, like, actually, that didn't really need to be unpacked. It wasn't as deep as it maybe seemed to be, but it's quite easy to convince yourself or be convinced that something has deeper meaning when it necessarily doesn't, just as it is. Vice versa, right? Which is the whole need to do that in the first place.
Sure.
To suppress things. So I guess I've always been a bit concerned about that, but I certainly see the value of doing when it's done well.
I think there's a lot to be said for going in with a certain objective as well, right? Like, I think it works very well when it's like, I see this particular behavior that's holding me back and would love to get to the psychological bottom of why that is. And I think that can be really powerful as well, because you can really start to unpack all of our bad behaviors come from somewhere, right? And I think when it's a bit more contained like that, you maybe do less of, as you were talking about, this kind of just feeling like you're doing therapy for the sake of therapy.
Yeah. Well, it was less the therapy, but it was just certain parts of it sometimes. Yeah. But no, the overall experience was very positive for sure. Do you appreciate the sense of irony of a founder talking about how he enjoys solving the problems of his own mind? Like, that's.
I do. I don't think I'm a particularly conventional founder, to be honest. For better or worse, I think.
I wouldn't say so. No. That's why you've been on the show twice.
Yeah, absolutely, mixing it up. But yeah, and I think there are lots of areas. I think you have to lean into your strengths, right? Like, there are lots of, like, some founders are really good at things that I'm just not good at. Like, I also have a very dyslexic mind, and I've been reading quite a lot about that recently. Actually, one of the recommendations from my therapist was like, maybe you should accuse me of mismanaging my neurodiversity, and I wouldn't classify myself as neurodiverse just because I just don't love the branding of it. Like, I don't think Unplugged's a wellness business, right? I just don't love, like, the branding of the whole space. But
yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that branding either.
But I would say I'm dyslexic for sure. And what's interesting about that is, dyslexics, basically, you've got your right side of the brain, the left side of the brain. The right side of the brain is more of like the bigger picture, like how the whole system works together. And then the left side of the brain really gets into the technical detail. So when it comes to, like, skill mastery, for example, we start on the right side of the brain, so like starting to figure out, the kind of basic field of play. And then as you go to the left side of the brain, like, that's where the real mastery starts to happen. So if you think about understanding, like, tenses in a language or learning to play a musical instrument, like that's really very left side of the brain. And dyslexics are basically slow at making that transition, so they end up doing much more in the right side of the brain. And this has strengths and weaknesses, right? Like, then again, everyone's different, in everyone who would class themselves as dyslexic, it shows up in different ways. But I think the broad category of how brains work is, there's this kind of slower movement over the left side of the brain. So as a result, you spend more time in the right side of the brain. So it means that a dyslexic like myself, like, I'm really bad at things like languages, and I can get into the details, but, like, I don't love details, to be honest. I'm very much like a bigger picture kind of. I like to spend more time there and understanding how the whole system works. But I think what you're really good at as a dyslexic is like getting the gist of something. So you can very kind of quickly get to the heart of the matter, simplify, like really understand the essence of something. So I think there were things in the business that I was just trying to do myself that I've actually been like, when those work someone who's way better at this than me. And I'm good at working with other people. I'm not great at doing the work myself. So give me a piece of work to do. To be honest with you, I'll probably do a half-assed job of it. But I'm good at, I have a very easy time trusting people. I am good at like navigating people stuff. So I'm good at like understanding how the whole system works together. So I think there's lots of things I was doing that just was really not suiting my way of working. And again, I think it's this like narrative, like I'm the founder, I need to solve this, I need to do this. And like, just this kind of not taking a step back and
not playing to your strengths.
In that particular instance, I wasn't being very pragmatic.
It's nice to hear you say nice things about consultants and fractionals too, because of as you know, I'm a fractional CCO as my day job, so that's nice to hear.
Underrated.
I'm glad you've
Anyone
come
listening, I highly recommend it. Yeah, no, I was really scared. It's kind of an arrogance as well, right? Like you think you know everything.
Well, I mean, no, I understand it. I've always understood that hesitancy to work with consultants and fractionals and stuff. I think it is becoming more widely accepted now as a especially early on in a business's journey to bring in temporary experts in certain fields to help with certain things at the right time, which is a good thing. And it's because of conversations like these and sharing those success stories and more and more there's a lot more transparency about entrepreneurialism and startups, and you hear more and more now that really the best startups tend to become the best startups because they are able to keep their overheads low, but find the experts to come in and work on the business at the right time, the right people. And the best way to do that is through consultancy, advisory, fractional. That is just the best cost-effective way of doing it.
I think there's a big, one, there's just a huge amount of fluff out there, and two, like what you put in massive impacts what you get out, right? Like you really need to know what to look for. And I think that,
that's the hard bit.
I probably got...
Because you don't know what you don't know.
100%.
So
I think in the early days, we were probably very bad at that as well, right? I think that's why we maybe ended up having some not so good experiences. And I think as we have better understood the game we're playing and what's important, what is missing, then it's a bit easier to make the right decisions. Because it's like the difference between this person and this person can be just so huge as well, which is crazy, right? Like that's the tricky thing is, again, like it's amazing. Always find it amazing how I can speak to like 5 or 6 people, and then like the last person is just so much better than all of the others for solving that particular problem. And it's like, wow, I'm so fucking glad I spoke to that person, because it just massively impacts the outcome. So it's super interesting just how much it hinges on like certain people.
Quite often as well, I've noticed in my time doing this is that hardly anyone really knows what they want, really. So, they know that they, for example, with what I do, know that they need some help with the commercial side of the business. So sales, marketing, right? They know, but they have no idea what that person looks like, what it is they should be working on, because they have a blind spot. So, when you ask them to picture what does that ideal person look like, what skills are they bringing to the table, what experience, they just couldn't tell you. So when it comes to finding that person, it's very difficult. Sometimes it jumps out at you, but sometimes it doesn't. So quite often the advice I give in that regard is like, speak to some people, find out. You've got to have a picture. I mean, it's the same problem with early full-time hires. In early stage recruitment in startups is exactly the same whether you're hiring the first, customer success agent or account manager or whatever. The issue crops up again. It's like they don't really know what they're looking for, and they just interview, waste a bunch of people's time. And it's like, if you just taken a month first to sit down and really figure it out, speak to people who were in your position before, and get an idea of what that ideal profile looks like, understand what the business needs are, et cetera, do the work, then you'd probably hire someone in half the time. But it's not easy to do that, because that involves you taking a step back from the business, which, as we've literally just been discussing, is a very difficult thing to do, because you're in it and you need to feel continuously in it. And a lot of people can't afford to do it either, because it can be very detrimental to the business. So it's not an easy thing to do. I totally understand.
Yeah, for sure.
And there are a lot of idiots out there. I know that in my space, especially, there are like Jesus Christ, in sales especially, right? Sales and marketing, like the 2 areas that I work, I straddle, and it's like the biggest amount of charlatans are in both of those spaces. Like, I'm fully aware, so it's an uphill battle.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, listen, man, we've come to the end of part 1 already. As you can see, time still moves at an extraordinary pace when we record this show. That hasn't changed. So we're going to take a quick break. And for those listening and watching, you're going to have to subscribe, notifications, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. And you'll be able to check out part 2 with Hector in a couple of days. So that's the end of part 1.
Thank you for listening and or watching. Subscribe with notifications turned on to get notified when part 2 comes out. While you wait, please join in the conversation in the comments below.